everybody doing today? Yeah? It's like, this is like got to be one of the best conference venues, right? Because you're just like hanging out on the beach and you're like, okay, maybe we'll go do this. And then it's like, if the talk gets boring, you can just go outside and go sit out on the beach. Yeah, and it's like, you read my mind. Yeah, well, and I got the good task of like the post-lunch talk. So hopefully I hope to make this like a real, real smooth, ease into the afternoon. I have had people fall asleep at talks before. And I'm always just like, I'm sure that they're coming from like a really far away time zone, and that's why. That's you got when you speak, you got to psych yourself up with stuff like that, right? And it's always really good to go home to your wife. She's like, how do people like it? And you're like, yeah, a couple of people fell asleep. Yeah. So, anyways, hopefully we won't do that today. If you do like think you just want to hit the beach or whatever, you can hit me an email, and I have an autoresponder already set up, so it'll like auto give it all to you right now, and so you could just leave with no regrets at that point, and you would have it all. So if you send me email there, it should auto respond. And if you do it and you don't get an auto response right away, like give me a shout, and then I'll check that or whatever. So okay, so I'm in from Texas. I'm from Austin. I work over at Signal Sciences. I think Signal Sciences has been around. I think we've got a party tonight that should be good if you're interested in checking out an after party. Hit me up if you don't know anything about it and you want to come. We'd love to have you. Also, I have some courses on DevOps over at lynda.com, also LinkedIn Learning. And sometimes, and I've been kind of bad about it lately, but me and a couple buddies, we blog over at the Agile Admin. And then a lot of us have put together the courses over at lynda.com. So I kind of thought I'd give you the summary up front too, so we kind of know like where we're going and we kind of see the roadmap for the path for today. I think we see that DevOps is changing, and there's a big risk. I think that security is in a little bit of a crisis, but I think we have some good things coming out. I see a lot of like forward-leaning security shops that have seemed to have found the way. And we're also going to juxtapose some of the old ways and the new ways of security, especially in the context of DevOps. Okay, so I've also had like these sort of existential questions on my mind lately. I'm asking like, okay, can security as an industry really rise to the demands of DevOps? And are we able to is DevOps able to actually handle all of the cultural baggage that security is bringing to it, right? And maybe we'll unpack a little bit what that means, but like, I mean, there's a lot of security stereotypes, right? And like, they're there for somewhat of a reason. And our industry is traditionally kind of a little bit more difficult. And are we gonna mess up the whole DevOps thing along the way with that? And and basically, I'm like worried. I'm like, this DevOps thing has been really beautiful. It's done a lot of really good things and has been built up. And is security just going to come in and like smash it like they seem to do? We seem to do, right? Does that resonate with anybody, or you guys? Does that sound good? I mean, the beach is still available, so I don't feel too bad about it. So my journey, I started out working at right out of college at this big billion-dollar company. We had these brutal on-call rotations. We did these crazy 24-hour go-live deployments. And it was all waterfall, and then but some of my greatest friends were kind of born in that job, and that was the place where we came from. And in 2007, I went to a startup, and we were doing stuff in Amazon Cloud. I learned at that startup a little bit about failure and about what actually makes me happy. Then later, I went back to that same big company. And I guess I don't have to slide that, but then we were just kind of said, all right, hey, like ignore the rest of the company, go cloud and go all in. And we had a really great time. A lot of us that kind of lived that old style of those 24-hour painful, deployments and weekends. It's like we were like deploying lots of times per day. We were not having crazy on call, and it was really great. And we sort of saw the saw the future. We started back in 2010. We had a case study written on us, and as we were doing infrastructure as code. And we kind of did something really neat at this company. We delivered 4 SaaS products in 2 years, which was like a really big thing for us back in 2010 and 2011. And then around that same time, I found the rugged software movement. I live in Austin, and I was lucky enough to meet Gene Kim in a bar, and so that was great. I was like, we just read Visible Ops, and that was before Phoenix Project and all the other books he's written, and we had a good time there. working on a project called Gauntlet, and then later I've joined Signal Sciences. But I kind of came to the realization through all this, and probably many of y'all have as well, is like in our careers, like what's really important. Like, and I think this is one of the things that I think sets DevOps apart from a lot of other movements and things we've done in our industry, is like our insistence on culture. And we always say DevOps. I like the idea of like DevOps is friendship. It really started out with the idea of having compassion for operations, because we would start and it would be like, okay, you'd have 10 developers to your one operations person. There's this whole throw it over the wall mentality. There's that picture of the developer girl that's got the building on fire. It's like it's ops problems now, right? That was like our life in images. But we have seen that labor inequity actually permeates all of the IT organizations, and in security we live this as well. So for every 100 developers, you would have 10 operations folks to like one security. And these are like order of magnitudes, but do those numbers resonate with anybody? Yeah. Yeah, there was like, yeah, I'm the one, right? Or like I'm just a half. Like I'm supposed to like do half my job is something else, right? And so even with all that and kind of the baggage that comes with that, I still remain pretty optimistic. But then I'm kind of an optimistic type of person. But then earlier this year, I started having some doubts. And my first one was I was at RSA. And there was a bus that drove by, and it said, DevOps in real big letters, and it was for a company that's like very much not DevOps. And I was like, oh, geez, we're just a marketing slogan now, right? And it's sort of like, and so I claim that as like security being security, right? That's what we do. That's what we do, right? It's like you can rewind like 5 or 7 years ago, and it's like cloud finger quotes, and then 3 years later it's like cloud security. That's what we do. You're like, nothing has changed, but just we've just rebranded, right? And it seems like what we do. And then later that year, so I'm not just blaming on security, but I was at the expo floor at Docker, and there was a booth that said like the DevOps tool chain, and it was like I can't even remember what it was. It was like, put your automation in a Windows box on a VMware and a Docker. I was like, that sounds like a nightmare. Like you don't want to do that. Like that's something that you're not interested in running all this stuff. And so I sort of felt like, have we allowed this to become a slogan or a gimmick? And what really had DevOps become? What have we kind of built over the years? And if you're new, like this is where I started kind of coming to those questions that I posed earlier on. And I think back about two of the main folks that actually like really helped DevOps get started. So do you guys know who these folks are? Nope. Okay, so the guy on the left is Patrick Dubois. He is the guy who coined the word DevOps. He lives over in Ghent. In 2009, him and Andrew Schaefer and some other folks had sort of used the words like agile infrastructure or whatever, but then he decided to host the first DevOps days. And he was like, we just need a conference where developers and operations can come together and meet. The guy on the right is John Willis. John Willis, along with Damon Edwards, they run the DevOps Cafe podcast. But John's done a lot of good stuff. He's worked from Chef to Docker. He's doing a lot of cool stuff now. But like a lot of the industry, like I don't know if you guys are familiar, but like a lot of the communities that kind of arise in like in a programming language or a practice area, like they kind of take on like the however the kind of personality of the main founder. Well, like Patrick is extremely nice guy. You can tell he's very friendly there. But that's like one of the things where DevOps really is always kind of insistent on culture and a lot of push towards that. It's because Patrick really helped us, like especially in the early days, coming out of the agile stuff, saying like let's build the right culture, and that's the big push behind this. And and I get it. Like I see like in my own story, like okay, I teach DevOps classes and I work at a vendor that does kind of some stuff in the DevOps space and the DevSecOps space. I help write articles about DevOps and security at Signal Sciences. But it really helped me start thinking about this as I was kind of having these existential doubts and this idea of like, what am I really doing here, is to sort of go back to what Patrick said all the way. And I think this quote came from Patrick back in probably 2010 or 2011. He was kind of posed with the challenge of like DevOps is great because like a lot of startups can do it. I mean, if you got 20 people, like sure, fine, everybody's like one happy family team, but it's not going to work in the enterprise setting. And he said, culture is the most important aspect to DevOps succeeding in the enterprise. And I think when we kind of rewind and really think about it, what is it we're doing, and we kind of get stuck thinking about tool chains and all this other automation and all this other business, we kind of lose kind of the focus of what we're actually trying to accomplish, and what DevOps has already accomplished so far. I think about this personally in my family. I like to say that we have a moon culture in my family. We're not. It's not like it's not quite as mystic as you might think. But when my daughter was like 2 or 3, she's 5 now. My oldest is 5, and she would always say like, "Oh, the moon's out tonight." She really was really excited about seeing the moon, and I started realizing like. Something in me started to shift, right? Like I got excited when I saw the moon. I started downloading apps to like figure out the phases of the moon. Then I could like tell her like, yeah, honey, it's like a waxing crescent moon tonight or whatever, right? I could be like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, it's going to rise up over this way or, whatever. And so I started thinking that like I started having, and it hit me one day on my drive home, and I saw the moon, and I call my wife. I'm like, you got to get Lydia outside because like it is like really big and it was great. But I realized like I was actually starting to change like my own personal desires and my personal opinion, and like I developed this new understanding. I had a shared language, shared views, and then I was even putting like those apps on my phone, right, to have the tooling. So I started thinking back, and this is our original team that kind of put this together. And I've given a version of this talk to. I should also preface the whole thing with I've only given this talk like a couple times, but mostly to DevOps audiences because I'm trying to be like, hey, how are security people actually going to move forward? So I'm kind of hoping that like. That we as security people agree, and we can kind of like, deliver on some of the promises I've made to these very kind DevOps people. That was a joke. So that's where there'll be more of those. I'll try to cue you next time. Okay. All right. So anyway, so I hope you can make a connection and make a friend through your journey today. Okay. So let's go back to our main point here is like I think security is in crisis. So there's a great book. Steve Beloven, he wrote the firewall book. That was like the book on firewalls in the late 90s. But recently he released a book called Thinking Security. He says companies are spending a great deal on security, but we read of massive computer-related attacks, and something is wrong, and the problem is twofold. We're protecting the wrong things, and we're hurting productivity in the process. So I think we can see that like there is a problem. Does this resonate with anybody? Does you feel like security kind of this hits? Okay, good. I'm glad. Sometimes like that one doesn't even get a laugh. I'm like, oh geez, you're in for it. That one's not funny to you. All right, so. So there's a great book on browser security called The Tangled Web, but in the first chapter, there's kind of a walkthrough of how the security industry and where it's been and been going over the last 30, 40 years. But in it says, security by risk assessment introduces a dangerous fallacy that structured inadequacy is almost as good as adequacy, and that underfunded security effort plus risk management are about as good as properly funded security work. Does that bother you? Like, yeah, yeah. What are they saying here, right? So they're saying by doing risk assessment that we don't actually have to do engineering, we can do actuarial stuff and buy insurance policies, and that we don't actually have to fund it anymore, and that we can just say, hey, like it's adequate, it's good enough. Slap an insurance policy on top of it, right? Now does that bother you, right? And I read that and kind of through that first chapter, he kind of walks through how over the years how like we used to spend a lot of money and time and on engineering stuff, and then over the years we kind of got compliance, we got these insurance policy things, and we stopped doing a lot of like actual engineering work, and we started doing more like this. Often I see that security is the cultural outlier. This is a book that came out last October called Agile Application Security. They say that many security teams work with a worldview where their goal is to inhibit change as much as possible. Does anybody have a friend who experiences that? Right? And I've experienced this personally. I have like I've had a developer friend tell me this. I was kind of working as a security guy on the kind of in the DevOps team, and they were saying, you guys just prefer to have a system unplugged and powered off. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm not an idiot. Like, we got to make money. Like, I was like, but it's sort of like that's their point of view is like that we are so disconnected from reality as an industry that like we would just rather have all the computers turned off. And then I hear a lot of security folks say this, like those stupid developers, right? It's like, oh, you got some sort of injection or some cross-site script or whatever problem with your page, like you must be stupid, right? Like one small flaw equals like a character assessment of a person, right? And we hear that kind of cascade through our industry as well. And a leading security industry publication recently sent me this in a flyer. And it says, hey, it's 30 times cheaper to fix security defects in dev versus prod. So we've known this. But the sad part is we've known this since 2002. And I got it on a flyer, like I'm not joking, on a flyer last year, right? So like in 2017. So that's like pretty disconnected from reality. So I actually tried the MapQuest joke with my father-in-law the other day, and he was like, yeah, MapQuest. I'm like, oh, no. Okay, so hopefully he doesn't watch this video recording. I'm sure he won't. Okay, so anyways, I think that the premise is like security's in crisis. We must change or we must die. So I work at Signal Sciences. We provide kind of a WAF-like type product. When I first started, I was like, oh, I'm going to research. Certainly, like there's cool stuff out there, whatever going on. And this is just to show like the disconnection of the research here. But one WAF provider says something like, every aspect of managing this is an ongoing process, blah, blah, blah. And you got to go in with everyone's eyes open and effort required to get and keep the WAF running productively. And they go on to say you need like 2 headcount. And I'm like, in an industry like where we don't have enough people to fill all the recs that are open, and like you are not going to get 2 headcount to do that. Like you have half a headcount at best, for anything, right? And so it's just very disconnected. Rich Mogul also says that we need to change or die. Or that we are going to do it. He was looking at the RSA floor and said a lot of people that are here now, they're not going to be here in 5 years. There's another, so the business is also saying that we need to change or die. This is from Fortune magazine, I guess about a year and a half ago. Well, I guess almost 2 years now. Time flies. But it says the average time to deliver corporate IT projects is 8.5 months. And it's risen from 8.5 months to over 10 months in the last 5 years. But why is that? And it goes on to say it's the growth of security functions which are too poorly coordinated, and they often arise from doing stuff like compliance, privacy, and data protection, and all the legal stuff that we're doing. So again, not actual functional engineering work, but just like more tasks and compliance-driven type stuff. You're probably like, okay, I think we've got the point right, but I think that we just live in this world where security folks are having a hard time keeping up, and now that we've kind of shifted into this like post waterfall and like an agile or DevOps place where we're able to not keep up with everything that's going on. And a long time ago, or like I guess 7-8 years ago, there was the rugged software development movement. I liked it at the time, and I still think there's a lot of value here. And just thinking about how in security, we always think about absence of events. We have costs, it's negative. We have a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt that we use to kind of promote that. But in the rugged sense, like we try to verify quality, there's a value proposition here. It's often pretty affirming. And even just I guess like in November, John Willis, who I mentioned earlier, he's like security didn't really get an invite to the DevOps party. So he actually was saying it from a sense of like, hey, DevOps people, like we did this wrong. Like we pulled in we fixed the 10-to-1 dev to ops, but we didn't fix the rest of the problem. Like we still have this divide. So it's not it's the blame doesn't purely sit on the security side. And he goes on to say like read-only containers and serverless shift the security story to almost 100% application security, and we're shifting everything around. I think that also really spells a lot more future for OWASP and kind of our application security space that we're in as well. Okay, so I think so. DevOps, kind of what we'll say is that we think DevOps is the way for security really to survive here. State of DevOps report says that people spend a lot less money whenever they're on security, whenever they're when they're doing DevOps right. And that high-performing orgs achieve quality by incorporating security and security teams into the delivery process. Here's a talk on this if you're interested. You can get the link from the slides. But I'd like to propose like what I think is like our new path, and we're going to juxtapose kind of old path and new path and kind of see if there's some ways forward. And this maybe will give you some ideas. And I'd love to hear if you have any other ideas of things that are going on, because I mean, part of the idea is here, like, DevOps has done a lot of really great things. Security's in crisis. Some people have already picked up on this, and some people are already kind of leaning into this and doing some really cool things. And I think we're now sort of like accumulating a long enough list of new things that we're doing that we weren't doing as a security industry 7 years ago. Then now we can start looking at this new list and say, hey, like we actually have something here. And like this is something that we think is worthwhile, and this is something that we add as a value creation or value to the business as we're kind of moving forward. So we'll go through them one by one. And our first one here was say, like the old way was like we like to embrace security or secrecy, and the new way is to create feedback loops. So Rich Smith, former security director over at Etsy, he also helped write that Agile application security book. He says a security team who embraces openness about what it does and why spreads understanding. So the idea is creating runtime loops for runtime feedback loops. And so you want to look at parts of your site where you can say, all right, like are people trying to take over like certain accounts for my users? What part of my site is actually under attack? What kind of vectors do people normally attack? Like these are sort of basics. These are like, there's kind of like, I hate to use sports analogies, but like tackling and blocking, right? It's like, do you know where the attacks are coming from, and if are they being successful or not, right? Kind of basic kind of stuff. Oh yeah, this is the only GIF I got in here, I think. But being able to answer that question of like, are you under attack? Do you feel like right now you can answer that question pretty well? Right? Like, no, we can't, right? We don't even have like that, like kind of that simple feedback loop in our industry. And then the where, we would really like to hope to know that as well. Okay, so Zane, who is the CISO and founder for Signal Sciences, he does this nice little thing. Like we used to do this, and kind of like, this isn't horrible. This is a feedback loop, right? Like having logs and like emitting kind of events and stuff like that. But then it's better if you can actually put visualization in front of folks as well for like what kind of attacks are actually happening, what kind of anomalies. And part of this story for us was, Zane built that over at Etsy, and then now we launched into Signal Sciences, and just putting some sort of instrumentation in place, whether it's a RASP or next generation WAF or whatever you want to put in there, but like put some sort of feedback and telemetry back from runtime. I liked this John Allspaw, who he was leading engineering over at Etsy, but at the time he was leading Flickr. But at the time of Rise of DevOps, if you don't know who John Allspaw is, he did the talk that was like, that is the talk that everybody thinks about when they think of DevOps, and it was called like doing 10 deploys a day. And everybody at the time in 2009, they're like, we do 4 deploys a year, and we pray that there's not any more than that, right? And so like, why would you do 10 deploys a day? But he's kind of been talking recently, like we and kind of really getting into more like how we're working with incidents and helping operations folks think differently about how we think about incidents. And I think it's also, this applies over to and crosses the chasm over into security as well. Like everything, all security incidents, even Equifax or whatever, like they could actually be worse. And so at the surface, like we want to ask these types of questions, like what went wrong, how did it break, how do we fix it? But we actually need to get to this deeper level of understanding of what are the things that went into making it not as bad as it could have been. What types of stuff did we do right? And like that helps you kind of juxtapose the two in your mind as you're kind of doing this incident resolution. It helps you also not stop doing the good stuff that you've been doing. So having instrumentation in place, like at least to be able to answer these level of questions, like that's really helpful. Okay, so the next one we'll zip through, but like, sorry, I should have said it. Right. So the old way was like just pass audit, right? The new way we're going to say is compliance adds value. Policies and procedures, that's what auditors live and die for, and having effective execution of those is what lets the business keep running. But a lot of times we don't understand that. We just put it like an us versus them scenario, and I don't know, like most of the PCI and all the frameworks. I mean, yeah, they're actually not horrible if you can remove all the waterfall bits. So you just got to figure out like how to work with your auditors on doing that. And you really want to get to this point where you're treating deploys as standard or routine changes that they've been pre-approved by management and don't require a heavyweight change review meeting or anything like that. And I like to think of like separation of duties that is considered harmful. It's like a lot of times we treat our software like we're like launching a nuke. And I think when I first found this, we weren't in like a nuclear war scenario, so it was like more funny, And now it's like, I hope that works. But we kind of treat it like this thing that's like a really a big thing. But if we read like even something like simple like PCI 642, it says, hey, it's not like the same person can't do it. It's like you can't use the same account to do it, right? And like auditors have been dealing with this for a while. Yeah, so basically you just need to work on putting independent checkpoints in place. If you need some resources on this, like here's one, and I think I got another link here. So sometimes I just like try to add slides in here that I think might be helpful for folks. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. But there's the DevOps Audit Defense Toolkit. So if you find yourself like fighting the DevOps battle and you need to fight the auditors on it, like this is a good place to start. And so hopefully that's helpful for you. All right, so old way is enforce stability, and a new way was create chaos. Everybody's familiar with Netflix's Chaos Monkey, right? Right. Why did like 100 lines of shell script like capture the heart and mind of our industry? Why, right? It's because they said we are going to apply actual chaos to our system, and we're going to try to break stuff. And everybody's like, that is genius, right? And we've sort of seen a movement like this where people are doing their own Chaos Monkeys, a lot of variation there. There's the Anti-Fragile book. Release It just came out with its second edition, and there's a whole chapter on chaos engineering. This is Michael Nygaard's book. I think I have a link to it. My buddy Aaron Reinhardt is working on a project called Chaos Slinger, if you're interested in doing that, but they're doing chaos experiments. It adds misconfiguration to your stack, checks to see if it gets detected. It runs as a Lambda and serverless. But part of the idea here is like we're trying to validate our system and make sure that it can handle chaos, and we do this through chaos experiments. And I liked in Nygaard's book, he sort of like really brings it all home for you if you're trying to think about this and how to do it in your organization. But building like a culture where like you have to opt out of the chaos, and like your management team's always saying like, okay, like, well, how come like is your stuff not hardened, hardened enough to like actually survive like the Chaos Monkey? Why not, right? And they kind of build a culture of it. So it actually is more of a cultural thing than a technology thing, right? Because like deleting some servers or turning stuff off, like that's really not that hard of a thing. And I'd recommend that book. Release It's a really great book. Also, I think another thing that we think about creating chaos, like I think bug bounties are another good example of that. Another way to do it. I have a friend who's not really in security at all, but he's like, oh yeah, we get pen tested all the time. And he's like, he told me like, he's really proud about it. And I thought, bug bounties again, right? Like it's more of a systemization of a thing that we've been doing for a really long time, but like it is a shift, and it is a shift that has crossed out of just like security pen testing and kind of like a smaller domain knowledge to like the wider development audience in general. And I think that's pretty cool. Old path, build a wall. New path, zero trust networks. So I do like the new OSI model. I actually can memorize this one. I feel good about this. And I like it. And I think that we see like our ACLs have moved off the network over to the application layer. And we see that we're no longer thinking, we still do it at some, but like as a whole, like we've kind of shifted into this idea like, okay, there is no perimeter, don't have anything like that. We're going to assume compromise at all layers. We're going to instrument everything that we can, and we're going to control our endpoints and all the way to our customer accounts, and just sort of instrument as much as we possibly can. I help run the Modern Security series, and we have Wendy Nather joining us from Duo Security this Thursday, so in 2 days. And if you can check it out, like it's a good like post conference event. Maybe you can come join us, and it should be a really good time. I really enjoy just hearing Windy talk about anything. So like it's going to be even better now. We're talking about zero trust networks. Okay, next, slow validation versus fast and non-blocking. So I think we had fast and non, like when we think about fast and non-blocking, like what do we really mean? Like we're saying, don't slow down delivery, still do continuous testing, but you don't always have to be like in the middle of the pipeline. You don't have to be like it doesn't pass, so like I'm going to go ahead and break the build. And maybe doing penetration testing on the outside or like in a sidecar fashion. At Signal Sciences, we do about 10, 15 deploys per day. We've done roughly 10,000 deploys in the last 2.5 years. And when we first started, like I pulled off Jez Humble's book on continuous delivery, and Jez is he's a former ThoughtWorks guy, and I said, all right, it's like how am I gonna how are we gonna do this? Like how are we gonna build this in a pipeline way? And so if you find yourself like needing to build a pipeline or need some like best practices, like I really enjoyed this book. And Jez talks about it now. He's like, I don't know, it's kind of a dry book. I don't know how it's done so well, or people really liked it, but it's really, really helpful. So, and one of the things that he talks about in the book is like, how little can you deploy at a time? Like, how long does it take you, your total cycle time from, checking in one small line code commit to have it running? And this is something that we really have kind of obsessed about over at Signal Sciences. Like we optimize for total cycle time, and that's that time from code commit to running in production. We built a deploy system and let everybody run it, and everybody has the access to push their own thing. We have a culture that says, like, if you write it, you must deploy it. You must make sure and support it in production. All these things are like cultural type stuff. They're not just, they're not just a push to say like, oh, let's just add new tech for the sake of doing that. We're also a security company, so like we couldn't just do this without putting security into it. So we put security as part of our CI/CD pipeline, and we mostly focus. So if you look at the 5 phases, or some people call it, have 6 or whatever, but you look at these 3 phases. These are where I like to think about where we can put some security in our pipeline. So what if I bundled into my app that leaves me vulnerable? So all of the libraries and other stuff and all the junk that I've inherited. Whenever I run and do my build and acceptance tests and integration tests, catch any security issues before release, and then in operation, you want to say, am I, that same question I was asking earlier, like, am I being attacked now? Is it working? But I like to think through those steps. The other 2 steps are also very important as well, but these are kind of where I've kind of put all of our effort in focusing on. So lastly, another one we have is certainty testing versus adversity testing. And old way was, or the new way I say is like be mean to your code. And so in this, the book Agile Application Security, they say the goal should be to come up with a set of automated tests that probe and check security configurations and runtime system behavior for security features that will execute every time the system is built and every time it is deployed. This is kind of our standard of what we're trying to do, but security tools are like kind of noisy, they're difficult to use. We needed a way to like collaborate between developers and operations security. We needed a way to span, across these groups that would make sense to folks. So I've been working on a project called Gauntlet, and but there's other stuff like security BDD, or like just using the robot framework or other types of testing. But this comes with pre-canned hooks. It doesn't install any tools, but fits in your CI/CD pipeline. You can check it out at gauntlet.org. And our really stunning graphics are, running these tests, and it passes out the back. It looks for anything called an attack file in kind of a plain English scenario. You can get it from the gem, but I really prefer to like run in a Docker container, which I have a link for that next. But it's real simple of like, what am I trying to test? Given I have this setup here, and I run this test, then I expect the output to be this. And this is a very simple thing that you can put in like a Travis or Jenkins or whatever, and run with your site. Aaron Reinhardt over at United Healthcare, he says, yeah, hey, we use Gauntlet and we've used it a lot, and he said it saved millions of dollars. I was like, well, how do I get any of those millions of dollars? That'd be really great, Aaron. So he was just sort of being pretty excited about it. But kind of that was our original hope, like really to build something that would help folks, both whether you're in security or development or operations, to kind of build this kind of plain text thing. So Matt Johansson and I did a talk on this, and the workshop has some labs for Gauntlet. And if you want the links, like they're all in there as well. Okay, and I have some demo stuff. We'll kind of skip through this because we're kind of run a little lower on time. And we also have a way how to set it up inside of a CD system. And I really prefer to use it in a Docker container, and you can get that over at Gauntlet-Docker. So you can put the tool with all the Gauntlet with all the other tools that you have inside of the container and just execute it straight out of that. Okay, so another thing that we like to do is in security, we would always just like say, oh, we're going to do our testing when we're done, and that's a real waterfall type approach, but the new way is to shift left. I like Shannon Leitz's, you probably have noticed by now, I find a bunch of things that I like and I just assemble them all into a deck, and so sorry that I do that, but that's kind of the way, beg, borrow, and steal, I guess. But she talks about a software supply chain, secure software supply chain, and thinking about where we have all these phases, and then the questions to ask. Notice she has 4 phases for her pipeline. But thinking through okay, well, in design, like how am I adding security? In build, like are the components, do they have the right security applied to them? For deployment, how am I securing secrets and managing my config management system? Or operation, is my app getting attacked? But thinking through these different phases and kind of breaking this down, like I think that's a real helpful approach. And even stuff like the culture at Intuit's really cool, because they're like, all right, we're gonna do Red Team Mondays, and so the security team just gets around a big conference room and like tries to attack the sites in different parts of the system, and it's made a culture where like people will come and say, hey, we're making some changes to our application next week. Can you guys put us on your Red Team Monday list, and go up the list. And again, it's one of those things, like as a security person, like crossing the chasm into developers and operations people, like people that we were really kind of like separate silos from for such a long time. Now they're kind of engaging security and excited about it, and through stuff like this. And I think that this has the power to kind of be as culturally significant as like Chaos Monkey has or was, several years ago. And I think. Sometimes we think like, well, okay, I don't have to worry too much about my testing far left because, inheritance and all that stuff in containers, and it's all, isolated or whatever. But like Gareth Rushgrove has a talk on like what's inside that container, and, a good chunk of containers have vulnerabilities built. Surprise, surprise. I know none of us in here are surprised by it. But like just continuing to think through that whole pipeline and like how to break that up is really helpful for us. The last one, we used to take a real process-driven approach, and Jason Chan over at Netflix, he uses the words "the paved road," which I think is really helpful. It's making it easy for people to do the right thing. Whether it's like using gold images or having blessed builds and dependencies, or saying like if you kind of go with the standard processes, like you're going to get security by default. Again, like I think each of these areas, like I've just seen like are evidences of how like. As an industry, like security has shifted, and I'm pretty excited about that, and that's why I still remain pretty optimistic. So I guess in the end, like my last charter is like, hey, let's not be blockers, but let's be enablers of the business, and I think that's it. So if you send me an email, there's the slides, and we can have time for questions if y'all want. So, thanks.